Okay. Hi, everyone. Welcome to our first fireside chat of the spring semester. For those of you who don't know me, for older alums, my name's Madison, and I'm Lava Labs Director of Industry Relations for this year. I'm super excited to welcome our speaker today, Harj Taggar, who is currently a group partner at Y Combinator. Harj has a long history at YC. He was actually one of their very first partners, and he went through YC twice with two of his own companies. So, Harj, thank you so much for taking the time to be with us tonight.
Yes, excited to do it.
Awesome. So today in our audience, we have our awesome Lava Lab Spring 2021 cohort and some Lava Lab alumni. So every semester, we take in a group of 28 students comprised of developers, designers, and product managers. We put them into teams and we help them to build an MVP, which they have the opportunity to pitch at the end of the semester to a panel of investors and people in industry. We've been doing this for the past 8 years, and many Lava Lab alumni have gone on to build products and startups together. And like I mentioned, some have even gone and taken part in YC. So we're very excited to have you today. And let's get started. And everyone, I know people ask me about some questions, so we're going to talk for about, 40, 45-ish minutes, and then we'll open up the floor for the last 15 minutes, and you guys can ask whatever questions you want. Feel free to unmute yourselves. So just wanted to let you know before we get started. So Harj, I think your journey in the tech industry is super cool. It's a really great story. And to help everyone to get to know you a bit better, would you mind sharing how you got to where you are today at Y Combinator?
Yeah, sure. Yeah, it goes back quite a while now. I was in my second year of college, like way back now in 2004, and I was in England. I was at Oxford, and I was kind of just like looking for side projects, like things I thought would be fun to do and maybe learn about like businessy stuff. And a friend and I, or my cousin and I, had this idea to make a really simple website that would let students like buy and sell things to each other. And our idea was we noticed that there was a student newspaper where there was like a classified section, but no one really used it very much. And like the internet was getting popular. And so Facebook was becoming popular. And it just seemed kind of obvious that probably we were going to do more things online. So we made a really simple website to just yeah, students could like put stuff up there for sale, like mostly a lot of textbooks, but a lot of like electronics and various things. And I never intended it to be a startup, but I just found it kind of fun. Like it was really engaging. It was fun seeing people use it. It was fun trying to come up with ideas to get more people to use it. We rolled it out to some other colleges. And at the same time, I'd actually kind of thought that I would go into law and work at a law firm. So I was doing these internships at law firms. And I found just like during the day, I found it kind of soul sucking, working in like a massive corporate office, like, and starting to talk to people who had graduated and got into the law firm and realizing that like the work, like mostly they were photocopying and just doing like a bunch of pretty menial tasks. And in their mind, it was like, it's okay. Like, if we keep at this for like 5, 6, 7, 8, 9, 10 years, we'll make partner, and then life is really great because you can just like relax and get paid lots of money. And for me, I was like, same time working on this website, which I just found really engaging and fun. And I was kind of like, I don't know if I want to wait like 10 years to be able to like make decisions and do things and like actually enjoy what I'm doing day to day. And so I then ended up like dropping out of law school to pursue like a website idea as like a full time thing, which my parents were pretty unhappy about at the time. But I'm just super awkward because I was living with them, and they were like pretty keen on me being a lawyer. But we kind of struggled in London for about 6 months to try and turn this into like a real business. And to us, that meant trying to get some investment for it. And around like 2004, 2005, there just weren't any angel investors in London. Like everyone who was an investor came from the finance world, because that's the dominant industry. And in the finance world, you invest in things that have a certain amount of revenue and have a financial model and a business plan and all this stuff that we just didn't have. And it was hard to have because we were essentially this social slash commerce site for college students. And our plan was to make money someday in the way that Facebook planned to make money someday. And just no one really got what we were doing. And so after about 6 months of that, we were getting pretty burnt out and demoralized. and I did a Google search for what are mistakes that startups make or something like that. And the top result came back to this essay called 18 Mistakes That Kill Startups by this guy called Paul Graham, who I knew nothing about him at the time, but I read the essay and it was just really well written and really compelling. And I had a whole bunch of thoughts from it. The first one was, whoever this guy is, he knows way more about startups and has far better advice and knowledge than anyone we've like met over the last year to talk about startups. So like, we would be really good to somehow get his advice on what we should do. And then like the article itself, like had this really specific piece of advice about, location. And I think like the point is, if you are ambitious and you want to optimize for just getting to the top of any field, you should move to the area where like the best people in the field are. So he gives this example, I think, is something I don't know. If you wanted to be an artist in like the 1400s, you would have wanted to move to like Florence in Italy. And then like, you know, more contemporary examples would be if you want to make it in the film industry, you should move to LA. And like, if you want to make it in the tech industry, you should move to Silicon Valley. And so that planted the seed in like my cousin and I's mind that, hey, like maybe we should think about moving to Silicon Valley, but we didn't know how to do it. We didn't know anyone there. And I kept thinking around Paul Graham's website, and he linked to this thing called Y Combinator, which said something like "want to start a startup?" ? Like apply to Y Combinator. And so I go to the Y Combinator website, and it was like very basic. Like they'd only funded maybe 5 companies at this point, and this is kind of taking us to around like 2006. But it sounded really interesting, and it sounded like exactly what we wanted, which was a 3-month program where you get to spend time with other startup founders and get advice from Paul Graham. And we were like, that sounds great. Like, we're not going to move to Silicon Valley permanently, but 3 months just being around other people doing what we're doing sounds good. So there's an application form. Let's submit the application, see what happens. And we got an email back saying you should come and interview. We'd love to meet you, learn more about your idea. So we said, great. And we flew out, did a 10-minute interview. They told us they would like to fund us. And about a month later, we flew out to San Francisco to start going through Y Combinator in 2007. I'll stop there because like you asked me more stuff, but like that's kind of how I got into tech industry. Was basically through that, then moving out to Silicon Valley in 2007, thinking it would be 3 months. And I guess like the nutshell version of it is like, I don't know, 14 years later,
Right.
Still there.
Never left.
Yeah, basically never left.
That's kind of how it is in tech.
Kind of. But I mean, yeah, I never left sort of spiritually, I guess, but like I'm actually living in LA now, so like I don't know if that counts.
Right. Still in California, so we're
still California.
Close enough. That's awesome. That's great. That's really, I have so many questions about, I think, a lot of interesting about, if you want to be the best, artist, athlete, move toward the best people are in remote work, but maybe we'll save that towards the end. I think that's really interesting. But I would say that I think most founders can't even imagine going through Y Combinator once, just because like how popular it is, how hard it is to become a part of. But you went through it twice. So after finishing your second time being in YC, did you walk away with any new lessons or reinforce any particular perspectives you learned from your first time?
So I definitely had perspectives from doing a startup twice. I can talk about like YC specifically. Sure. All right. So let's see the YC thing. It's like, although I did it twice, the gap between it was so long. Like I did the first time in 2007 and the second time in 2015 that like it was unrecognizable. Like when I did it in 2007, like we had a batch of about 10 companies and Paul Graham was like the only person advising startups. And then when I did it with TripleByte in 2015, it was a batch of like, 100 something companies with like 10 people full-time advising the startups and this massive alumni network and just this general brand and machine around Y Combinator. Like just to give you an example, like in 2007, like when we had demo day, which is where you present to investors at the end of the 3 months, there were like 20 people there. They were mostly just friends of Paul Graham's that he'd convinced to show up as a favor to him. Like there weren't many people seriously looking to invest in companies. And then you compare that to like demo day today, there's like over 1,000 investors and it includes like massive funds that, are trying to do significant investments in the company. So it was like a very different experience. And I'll say that I think the thing that didn't change between the two was it selects for this, it puts you in this environment where you feel a lot of peer pressure to want to be as good as your peers are, and the peers are incredibly impressive. Like even at like a batch of like 100 companies versus 10 companies, there's just like all these really interesting people. And actually, if anything, the bigger YC got, the more you felt that in a diverse way, because in like 2007, it was mostly like nerdy tech people who had heard about Paul Graham because he wrote a lot of articles about programming in a very esoteric language. And like by 2015, as you said, like people know it so much. You had people from like all kinds of different industries working on very different companies, but they're all just really driven and ambitious. And so in a way, it felt like what I wish college had felt a little bit more like, which was people were there to be very focused and achieve a goal as opposed to like all the other super valuable stuff you get at college, which is like you meet friends and like you kind of figure out who you are as a person. But YC was kind of a more intense version of that, which I think was what we really wanted and felt really powerful in 2015 as well.
Yeah, that's super interesting. Just when we talked last week too, I feel like everyone here is very into tech, obviously, but I feel like we just known YC for so long as just being this very popular, incubator. And then I just like had a little chuckle because everyone starts off at the beginning, very small, very, not well known. So it's cool. It's amazing to see how fast, it's grown actually over the years. So that's really interesting. And you've been, you were there at the very beginning, took a little break, went and did some cool stuff, and now you're back at YC. But what are some of the common mistakes that you've seen over the years that founders make when they're, building their products, building their startups? What have you observed?
Yeah, many. Let's see, like,
maybe one that people really expect to hear about, and maybe one that people don't expect to hear.
yeah, okay, that's a good question. Okay, what's one that like people expect to hear about? What's the most common thing that people say you make a mistake about? Okay, I mean, a common one is people say a lot about like follow your passion, do something you love, build a product that you love, build a product for yourself. Um, which I think is valuable advice actually. Like where it's difficult to follow is if you're like not completely sure what you're passionate about, in which case like I think the not obvious advice is I think it's okay to start a company working on something that you don't feel is like your lifelong deep passion, like so long as you can find a way to really enjoy building working on the company. And I think that's a mistake people make sometimes, is that they're like they want to chase after an idea that sounds like it will be really successful and plausible. And I don't know, like nowadays it might be cryptocurrency is pretty popular. So you start a cryptocurrency company because it feels like a good area to start a company in. And it probably is, but like let's just say hypothetically you find finance and economics and I don't know, distributed systems like very boring. Like you're gonna have and like you kind of think that everyone who uses cryptocurrency is a bit like strange, like and like you're gonna have a really hard time enjoying working on that company, because it's just like not really you. Whereas let's say I don't know, like biotech is another area that's like pretty popular. Like you could start a company in there, and even if it's not your passion or you don't have like ton of expertise, if you can get excited about the idea of I don't know building better software to help with medicine and health, like you can probably grow to love that startup. You can probably grow to love the people that you build it for, and you can probably grow to love it over time. And so yeah, I think that's just something I would say. It's like it is actually really important what you work on from just a morale motivation perspective. But I don't necessarily think from the onset you have to be 100% convinced that this is what you want to spend the rest of your career working on. So long as you can imagine a world where you could get excited enough about it to work on it for a long period of time.
Yeah, that's really interesting. We actually just talked about that in our cohort the other day. I can see everyone shaking their heads. Our director of operations did a good job. We take a lot of tips from YC. I'm curious, were you, I know when you were at Oxford in your first company, I mean, that sounds like something you're really passionate about, but can you talk more about, I don't think many people know about your second company, and was that something that you were very passionate from the beginning, or is that something that it took you a little bit to learn to love?
Yeah, I think it was probably It was so my second company was Triple Byte. Well, so my first company was called Automatic, and that actually started out as what I said. It was like solving my own problems. So I was pretty excited about it, and it was also pretty cool that like all the people using it were like my peer group. Like if there's something that was energizing about like running into students saying they'd heard about the site, and like it just felt cool to work on something where I'm like, ah, like people like me use it. That feels awesome. But interestingly enough, like so we sold Triple Byte, we sold Automatic, but we'd actually pivoted the company because we were struggling to get growth amongst college students, and we pivoted towards more building tools for merchants that wanted to sell to students. And that turned out to be a better business. But we definitely weren't as excited about it because it just wasn't as like cool building tools for these merchants as it was building stuff for students. And so we ended up selling pretty early. It was acqui-hired pretty early, and largely I think because we weren't that excited about building for like merchants because we weren't like e-commerce merchants ourselves. Then with TripleByte, I'd say. Yeah, look, I wouldn't say like so. TripleByte was a skills assessment platform for software engineers, and like the idea is that we want to help anyone in the world who has like the right ability to get access to the best opportunities. And we felt that a hiring process that's based strictly on assessing someone's resume tends to favor people who have good resumes as opposed to people who have like the best skills. And so that was something I was really excited about. Like I wouldn't have said that before the company. I was like, okay, if I were listing the things I'm most passionate about in the world, it's like making hiring more meritocratic. But like when I listed out ideas of things I could plausibly work on that are an intersection of like my skills and like chances of like getting customers and understanding how to build the company, like and something I could get excited and rally behind. And I was like, yeah, like that checks those marks. And so that's kind of what I mean by it. It wasn't necessarily like my life's work, but it was something where I was like, I know these people, I know software engineers pretty well, and like I could get excited about a company that had a mission of equalizing opportunity, access to opportunity.
Yeah, totally. That's really interesting. And do you feel like when you decided to, and you had a couple of co-founders for Triple Byte as well, when you decided to go off and build Triple Byte, how was that, building a company for the second time? And did you feel like, did you enjoy the process more the second time around?
Yeah, it's weird. It's very different, and like the first and second times have like real pros and cons. Like the pros of like what's better about the second time is you feel in a way you feel like certain things just feel, you have more confidence in. Like you feel like you have more confidence in the ability to pick an idea, assess if it's a good idea, assess if it's working or not. Like you kind of know the right infrastructure to build and avoid the most common mistakes. And so I think you can run a really good process. Like second time founders tend to be really good or much better than the first time around at like operating a company. And by that I just mean like knowing like which metrics to track and like and a general sense of what it feels like when something's working and what it feels like when it's not. So, and then other things are slightly easier, like hiring people if you've done it before can be slightly easier. But like the downside to it is it becomes really easy to overthink everything because, and that's definitely something we suffered from, or I suffered from with Triple Byte, is like because you've already done it. Like the first time around, you were just like naive and you just like are super. You're on an adrenaline rush from just doing your own thing, and so you just like energetic and motivated all the time, and you don't know what you don't know, and so you in a way you're more likely to stumble across like a flash of insight that you didn't even realize was an insight, whereas as a second time founder um, you're more likely to dismiss ideas, I think, or because you just sort of overthink things and you get a bit more critical, and the bar you raise the bar for like how good something has to be in theory before you want to practice it and put it into execution mode. And so like a very common pattern I see, I didn't know how to reach for this with the audience, but it's just like as a first time, I actually often think that first time founders can often be better suited to starting a company in the sense of like that flash of inspiration or insight you need to get a unconventionally good idea. And you need an unconventionally good idea because if your idea is like obviously good on paper, it's there's probably a reason, either there's a reason it doesn't exist or you've got like a ton of competitors. And so usually the best kind of startup ideas are the ones where it's like not obvious it's a good one. Something like Airbnb would be the prime example of where it seemed crazy to like rent out airbeds and rent out like apartments to stay at. And those were first time founders. And I have a hard time believing that they would have come up with that idea if they were second time founders, because what would have happened if they were second time founders is they'd have like had a framework for assessing startup ideas, and they'd have been like, how big is the market for staying on like someone's couch? They'd be like, like not very big. And what are we going to tell like our other founder friends that we're working on this like crappy airbed website? Like it would have, whereas like, because they were just first time, they didn't know what they were doing. And they were just like, this is cool and we want to use it. Like they didn't know how naive and lame sounding the idea was. So it didn't matter to them. And I think that ends up being a really powerful thing that you only get once. And it's very rare I found that founders can like, usually what you find with second time founders who have like really good insights about companies to start is that they start a company in the same domain as they did in the first one, and they just understand the market better. And so they can like make something in the same space that's slightly better. But that again doesn't tend to, at least when I've seen, pattern match onto the companies that really break out and do well. Like a lot of the companies that break out and do really well are first time founders just following their like things they're interested in.
Yeah, that's really interesting. Something you said about when, right, the best ideas, they're not the most obvious ones. Definitely have heard that a lot. And our cohort is actually, I know you mentioned this last week, but our cohort is actually starting right along this process of getting into teams, and they're going to start ideating about, problems that they want to solve this semester with their products. So do you have any advice on this part of the process? I know it's kind of different because mostly people come in with YC with ideas, but what have you seen that has worked well in the ideation process for people who say, okay, I want to build something, but what am I going to build?
Yeah, it's really interesting. Like, there's this book I read years ago. It's called Impro by Keith Johnstone, it's actually like a book about improvisational comedy. And like Keith Johnstone's like the founder of this like improvisational comedy movement. I'm not like some like improvisation, like it's some like improv nut or anything, but like the book got recommended to me as like a good book to read about just stimulating creativity. And it talks about like lots of really interesting things. And like a point that he like really goes deep on is this idea that like if you want to get creative and come up with ideas, you have to almost get yourself out of the way. So the way he talks about it is it's like if you're a writer and you're trying to come up with like an idea for like something to write. Um, Rather than sitting down at your desk and being like, what should I write today? One way to do it is to like close your eyes and imagine that you're watching a writer and like that writer is writing something really interesting. Like, what are they writing about? And then in like improv comedy, he says like a technique he uses to get like his students like to open up is like mask work, where you like put on a mask and then people like suddenly feel that they like, if people can't see their face, like they can loosen up and like be more expressive. Where I'm kind of going with this ramble is that like when you come up with startup ideas, I think it's really important to get yourself out of the frame of like what's an impressive idea, what sounds like a good startup idea, what's a good like thing, and like try and reframe the question somehow into like what just seems like a cool project, what seems like something funny, like what might just be like what's something that almost just seems ridiculous, like if you were to start it, like or build it, like that's the kind of questions that you want to ask yourself. And then I find like ideas will flow from that. But when you like sit down, you're like at your desk and you're trying to come up with like, okay, so what's my like $1 billion unicorn startup idea? It like tends to just like stifle all of that, and you just end up sitting there looking at like a blank page.
Yeah, for sure. I think I think I've talked to a lot of people who've had that same thing where they're like, I'm going to build X, Y, and Z. It needs to fit all of these check boxes. But of course that never really works out in tech, as we all know.
Yeah.
I would say going off of that, because I think either, coming up with ideas or getting people to believe in your ideas, that's something that's really hard about being a founder, right? You're going to be faced with a lot of judgment, a lot of doubt. I remember with Airbnb, right? Everyone was like, you're crazy. Like, no one's going to do this. This is ridiculous. What if, I mean, in your opinion, or maybe some things that you've seen with other founders, what's the hardest part about being a founder?
Here's a question. In the early stages, it is, yeah, it's basically just like the emotional roller coaster mostly comes from existential doubt around like, are you wasting your life like on this? Because it's just like, it's working at a company or even being in college, you have like nice markers of progress and you're around a peer group of people who are all doing the same thing. So it's kind of like
Right.
human nature to be like, well, if everyone else is at like USC and like Lava Lab, like I can't be doing too badly. Like, and so like, and it gives you just like a sense of, like support and like progress, and you know that you're like, you know, in year 3 of 4 years of college, and then you graduate and then you get a job, and you know you're at like level 1 software engineer, and if you like keep your head down you'll be like level 2. Like the whole system's designed to like tap into that like human desire for understanding where exactly like on like the like life progress bar you are. And the problem with startups is that like the only sign of progress you have is like growth. Like I do you have more customers today than you did yesterday? And unfortunately that can be like, you know, sometimes you get lucky and you're Mark Zuckerberg and you launch Facebook and you graph just that you're basically just like hanging on for dear life, and all your stress is around like how do you grow and scale and keep this thing growing, which is I wouldn't want to diminish that. It's probably pretty stressful as well, but like there's like it's not quite existential angst. It's like, okay, I've been working on this for like a month and like one person signed up. Like, does that mean it's a bad idea? Or like, does it mean I need to just persist more? Like, I've read lots of startup articles and they tell me like persistence is key. So maybe I need to like just stick at it for another month. And you do that and you get to 3 months and 6 months. And it's like that's what makes it really hard is you just don't know if you should keep investing your time in it or not. And user growth graphs early on, like at best you might have spikes and they go down, then they go up again, and like ideally each tip is higher, but it's never this like nice smooth curve. And so that's just emotionally draining. And especially like, you know, unfortunately you guys are in like this position where you're like at a good college, and like it's like your options are quite like your what's the opportunity cost is quite high. And so like if you have that, like you compare it to like what you could have been doing instead of doing this like dumb startup with 10 users. Whereas like in a way it's almost easier if you're like a dropout and you literally have no options other than to like work on a startup because no one will hire you, like it can be easier in a way. But that's what makes it hard. So like I feel like a large part of startups is managing that psychology for yourself.
Yeah, that's really interesting. I know we definitely, well, I'm sure everyone has their own existential crises, but we definitely, we save those for our weekly Lava Lab meeting. So they're able to,
Nice. Good. At least
we
you have
help
some
each
group
other out.
therapy
Right,
going on.
right. Exactly. It's a group effort. Um, let's see. I think also I was really, I'm going to pivot a little bit, and go towards more, when you've helped like invest in companies, when you're looking at companies from the perspective of an investor. And you've invested in a lot of successful ones. I'll let you share which ones you've invested in. But what are some common patterns that you've seen from these companies that have quote, made it compared to those that quote didn't make it?
Yeah, I mean, yeah, like I like through YC, I've been involved with a ton, and I've like invested myself in like some companies that have gone public already. Like Open Door went public recently, and then some that are about to, like Coinbase and Instacart. And I think, I mean, this is like it sounds facetious, but like I mean, the number one thing you take away is just like just how different each of them is, like right down to the level of like who started the companies. Like I don't know, I'll give you some example of companies I know that are very like that you've probably heard about. And are super successful, or I know like the founders particularly well. So I don't know, let's take Stripe. Stripe's so it's like so Automatic. My co-founder is Patrick Collison, who is the Stripe CEO, and like Patrick is like an intensely intellectual engineer. Like he really loves building like and solving hard technical problems, and that's what motivates him, and that's what he's like brilliant at. And like Stripe is sort of like a you know, an obviously good company for someone, a good idea for someone like that to start. Like Eric Wu, who started Open Door, who's my roommate for 4 years, like he's not a programmer, but like he's like incredibly great storyteller and really good at understanding he's really good at understanding like market dynamics in a big picture way and like convincing people to either invest or to work for him. And like that's kind of the perfect idea. That's kind of the perfect kind of person you want to start something like Open Door, which was an idea that wasn't really about building hard technology, but it was about attracting a huge amount of capital and building a really big team early on, because what they do is they buy and sell houses, and then they need like a lot of money in order to buy the houses, and then they need a big team of people to go out and like do operations for the houses. And then like, I'm giving these examples just hopefully give you a flavor. Last one, just like, Brian Armstrong is like, who started Coinbase. He's like an intensely introverted engineer, like a very, very quiet guy, but like he's just slow and steady and finds like what he's doing interesting and like just has staying power. And like that turned out to be really valuable for Coinbase because he started Coinbase in 2012 when Bitcoin was seen as this like at best a toy and worse a complete scam. And like he didn't care that everyone told him continually it was a bad idea, because he's just like this introverted guy who likes working on it. And so he was like, I'm just going to keep like hacking away. Like all he did was like build product features. He was like, I just kind of find it cool. And like it took about 5 years of working on Coinbase for him to hit that inflection point where suddenly Bitcoin and crypto started exploding in 2017, 2018. And like many founders would have stopped well before then. And like, I guess the point I'm making is like, these companies are like the people who start them have very different personalities, and the skills they need to start that particular company make success are very different depending on what the idea is, what kind of market it's in. Like, and so there's not one, what you learn as an investor is like, as an entrepreneur, it's a bit of a frustrating rule, but what we learn as an investor is that there's not really any rules. Like there's like every time you think you've got it nailed down for, okay, this is the formula to succeed, like you come up with an investment you missed that was an exception to it.
Yeah, that's really interesting. No, I love hearing about those examples. That's really, really interesting. And that kind of leads me to another question I was thinking about the other day. Like when someone comes to you with, a startup idea, when you're out looking for startups to perhaps, get involved in, I know you say you don't have criteria, but are there indicators that you look for, like something that's like a positive sign that you're like, wow, like that excites me. That's something that really interests me.
Yeah, so it's funny. So one touching on kind of theme I've been going through here is like, I do look like partly like you look at not so much you start by almost not looking at what someone's saying or not paying too much attention to what exactly they're saying, but just like how excited do they seem about it. And like you have to be careful with that filter because like, I mentioned like Brian. So if you viewed that as like, I only want to invest in people who are really excited about what they're working on. And to me, that means people who are animated and bubbly and like a traditional salesperson, you would have missed Coinbase because that's not what Brian's personality is at all. And you'd have missed out like a company that's worth like $100 billion. And so like what you would have caught though is if you were still applying that same filter, you would have caught that like if you asked Brian a question about Bitcoin or cryptocurrency, he would have gone into like in-depth detail about the white paper he'd read, which was like way before like the original crypto white paper was released, I think in like 2011, 2010, something around there. And like he could quote it verbatim and very few people had even really paid attention to it. And so like you're looking for people that when they talk about their idea, like can go deep in it. Like when you ask them questions about it, you leave with the sense of, okay, like they have thought about this in way more detail than I have. And that's a good sign because they like are probably intrinsically motivated by just finding an interesting idea. And like when you hear people talk about or pitch their startup to you, like who sometimes can almost try and divert the question away from like when you try and ask them details about the company and they try and bring it back to a more high level, like, well, our vision is this, or like we're talking to these investors, like, it makes you feel like they don't want to talk about the actual company or the product, which makes me skeptical that they're that excited about it.
Yeah, that's a really good point. We definitely have lots of different personalities in Lava Lab and just, at USC. So we totally get it. That's something that's really good. I like the ideas of applying filters. Very, very useful. Let's see. I'm going to ask you one more question and then I'm going to do something new, which I've never done before, is do a series of like, I call them lava hot questions. They're like short questions I'll ask you.
Terrifying.
Right, I know, right? You're on the hot seat, Lava Lab.
Yeah.
But before we get to that, I always like to ask, if someone comes up to you, like say a student from the audience today, they say like, I have an idea, X, Y, and Z. Like here's what I want to build. I want to build a startup. What's the first thing that comes to your mind, and what do you say to them?
Who's your co-founder? Yeah, the first thing I'm most interested in is like, who are you working with? Like, why did you choose to work with them? How well do you know each other? When's the last time you had an argument? Like, how do you handle the argument? How do you handle arguments with them in general? How are they under stress? Like, you're probably spotting a theme here, but we talked about like the ideas for a startup a lot so far, but like actually the most fundamental thing in the early days is like, how much do you like the person you're working with? Um,
Totally, totally. Happens to be Lava Lab's slogan. I don't know if you know that, but it's
Oh, I did not know that. What is
find your
it? I did not
co-founder.
know that. Meet your co-founders.
Yes,
Look at
yes.
that. Perfect.
Meet
All
your
right. So then
co-founder.
everyone here would have an awesome answer to it. Great.
Yes, exactly. Glad that we got that right. We're
Nice.
doing good. Okay, awesome. Okay, now we're gonna go into the lava hot questions. So I'm just gonna ask you. There's only a few. It's nothing bad.
All right.
And I'll just give you a question about like a topic, product, idea, and you can give me your thoughts about it in like 20 to 30 seconds. Okay. Question one: which is better, working from home or working in person?
I prefer working from home, but this like current situation we're in is not the optimal balance. Like, I probably prefer working from home because it's more productive, but then I would like an office that I go or a space that I go to meet up with my colleagues to chat. And I feel like that's better for like creative work. Like coming up with
Mm-hmm.
ideas and collaborating is good,
Yeah.
but and that's what offices are good for, I think. But like actual doing of work, I much prefer having like unearned chunks of time to work from home.
Interesting. Three things, they can be anything, a founder must have when starting out.
Must have. Well, yeah,
Yeah.
it's funny. All right, let's go with it. Like I said, there's like these are all exceptions, but like ideally you'd have a um, co-founder, and insight. By insight, I mean like there's lots of ways that this gets phrased, but like, what's the best way to phrase it? Again, let's call it domain expertise. I would say you want a co-founder, you want domain expertise, which is like a reason why you're uniquely suited to work on that product. And that doesn't have to mean you have like a PhD in something. It can just be as simple as like, you're really into some TV show and you want to build an app for everyone who like watches that TV show. That makes you a domain expert. Those two things. And then the third would be like the ability to manage stress, and that might be like some combination of like good set of friends that you can talk to, like figuring out like an exercise plan or a diet plan, or just like whatever it is that you need to do to just keep yourself like feeling good. That you're like on top of that. That would be like the three things.
Those are very practical. I thought you were going to say something like a really good, coffee machine, some like hot
Yeah, no,
ramen.
I think that's nice to have.
Yes, must haves. What's a new product or industry that you're excited about?
Yeah, I always had like I have things I'm personally excited about. I hesitate to say them on this because like I know I'll do the disclaimer. Like I already said it. Like I don't know anything about like which future industries are actually good ones to build startups in, and like you should optimize what you build around things you find interesting, not like someone on a panel said that is interesting. But I mean, yeah, I do. I think personally, right now, I find like the everything that's being built around cryptocurrency, and not so much like the trading of cryptocurrency, but this idea of building new financial products where like it's called DeFi, I guess, like decentralized finance. But that idea of like building products and services where instead of like one central authority that has the power to do whatever it wants, but like decentralized structure where anyone can build on top of it is interesting. It's funny, like when you talk about this stuff, if you haven't spent time reading about it, it just sounds like weird. And the problem it suffers from is that it's not clear how much of this is stuff that's really interesting in theory and how much of it actually solves a problem that anyone gives a shit about. But like it's interesting. I find it interesting.
Yeah, no, 100% agree. A lot of Lava Lab people are very, very interested in crypto. So I know they're like jumping up and down right now. Okay, second to last question. A book you recommend that all founders should read, or
Mm,
article, whatever you want.
Founders at Work by Jessica Livingston. She's one of the founders of YC. But I think it's like a great like candid sort of interviews with successful startup founders, and it gives you like a really good insight into like what it's actually like to start a company. Like from these, like it's got like Steve Wozniak, the founder of Apple, in there, and it like I think she does a really great job of like humanizing it and helping you get that balance between like these people are obviously talented, but they also had a tremendous amount of luck. And I think that's more than anything, that's kind of the story of starting a company is there's like it's some parts like talent, hard work, and then there's just like this luck multiplier that you can't really do too much about other than stick around long enough to hopefully have it boost the wind in your sails.
Totally. I love that. Jessica was actually the one, and I'm sorry, my Wi-Fi may be breaking up, so I'm not sure if you all can hear me. Okay, can you hear me?
Yep, your video is a bit choppy, but I
Okay,
can hear you.
cool. Thank you, thank you. Yes, the student Wi-Fi around here, it's not top level, but it works. That's awesome. Yeah, Jessica's great. And finally, this might be the most controversial question, but are you a Twitter person or a Clubhouse person?
Yeah, definitely Twitter. I have Clubhouse, but I haven't really gotten into it. But I definitely prefer Twitter.
Interesting.
I don't really have to
Awesome.
get into Clubhouse. I guess it's 'cause I spend my whole day on Zoom talking to people, and then like in the evenings, the last thing I want to do is hear more people talking. That's probably just because I'm
Yeah.
more introverted.
Yeah. Yeah. Natalia, Clubhouse is overrated. That's our final declaration on that. Awesome. Alrighty. Thank you so much, Harj. That was a really, really awesome conversation. And now we're going to open it up to everyone in the audience. So if you have a question that you would like to ask Harj, yes, Jules, feel free to raise your hands. Oh, wow. Okay. Awesome. Jules, go for it.
All right, I just want to say thank you. My name is Jules. I'm a senior here at SC. So
Hey,
yeah, thanks for talking to us. So, just two questions. First, you mentioned something that was really interesting. You said that like second time founders have a hard time, like breaking that barrier because of because of everything you mentioned. So, how did you break that barrier when you founded your second company?
yeah, I mean, the truth is, I struggled with it for a while because I knew I wanted to start a company before I knew which company I wanted to start, and I spent about 6 months just spinning my wheels. To be honest, like I spent 6 months like coming up with startup ideas, and then I had access to all these other like startup founders and investors, and then run the idea by them, and I learned really quickly that like if you know smart, experienced people and you ask three of them if your idea is any good, they are guaranteed to find at least one or two like pretty articulate ways of why it's a terrible idea. And so like all that happened to me honestly was I did that for about 6 months and then I basically just told myself like if I don't just pick something and start it like by the end of next week, I've just got to admit I'm never going to start a company and like move on with my life. And that was enough to like give me into some impetus because I was like, I am really keen to start a company. Yeah, I'm not sure if that's perfect, but that for me it was just like I had to set a deadline, and either like do something by then or not.
All right, thank you. And the second question is, a lot of us are wondering, what webcam are you using? Your video is like really clear.
Uh, yeah, God, funny. Um, yeah, like I have, but I mean, it's like it's not like a webcam. It's like I have an actual camera that I use. It's called like a Sony A6600. I use it for photography, and you can get something called a cam link. I don't know if anyone's familiar with it, but you can basically use if you have like a decent camera, you can hook it up to a cam link and a HDMI cable to just stream. So you get like good quality video. And like, I don't know, I figure like if I'm on Zoom all the time, like you guys will have a good camera.
All right, thank you. Appreciate it.
Anyways.
Awesome. I think Mena, you were next.
Yeah, okay. First of all, like, thank you for your talk. I really enjoyed listening to everything you had to say. I guess, like, since you've had a lot of experience being a founder, I wanted to know, like, if you've ever dealt with, and if you did, like, how did you deal with imposter syndrome?
Yeah, it's a great question. Yeah, I mean, like constantly all the time. And actually, it's another thing where, like, as a second time founder, it gets worse because, like, I mean, my first company wasn't a massive success, but it was enough to, like, for people to feel like I should have, like, it was enough for me to feel obligated, to feel like I knew what I was doing, and I just didn't feel like that at all. Like, how do you get over it? Like, honestly, I don't know if it ever goes away. And so the best you can do is just try and focus. So, that there's a thing about how, like the way the brain works, like if you tell yourself, like, don't think of a brown elephant, like it's impossible to not do that. So, like, I feel like as opposed to like, how do you get yourself to not feel imposter syndrome? Like, what can you just do instead? And like, so then I would try and just be more like strict about focusing in on like, okay, like what are my actual goals? My goals are to like increase revenue for this company. Like, how do I do that? Like, make sure like, okay, this week I need to be working on these things. Like, I was always just very like clear about like, what are my tasks? How do they tie into my goals? And like, how do I keep myself busy? So that I don't have time to like, I don't have the luxury of like, like ruminating on like my imposter syndrome. Like that was the best way I found to handle it.
Awesome. Thank you.
Cool. I'm just going to go down my screen. Connor, you're next.
Nice. Hi, Harj. Thanks so much for chatting with us. I had a question about YC specifically. I know a big thing at YC is like they say they take companies at all levels of traction and scale, but I'm curious to hear what your personal opinion is on like what's the best time or like scale for a company to think about joining YC such that they can like take advantage and like maximize all the benefits that the accelerator provides.
Yeah, it's a question. I think it's like, I think the best time to join YC is once you've got a first idea that you're excited about yourself and you've done like a little bit of work. Like, there's always low hanging fruit to test out ideas. So I'll give you like another example. Actually, before I started TripleByte, another startup idea I had was to start like an app for helping people quit smoking. And like the way I like tested that people, it was, on the one hand, it might sound obvious, but like, we had a specific idea around it, which was like to send people like e-cigarettes with like nicotine cartridges that taper down the dosage, because it was like a way that people, like say they quit smoking. And so like, I thought it was a good for the world idea. I hadn't like never smoked myself, so that was kind of the reason I ended up working on it. But like I posted onto Reddit, like where there's a quit smoking forum, and asked people like, hey, like if we put together this program and charge this amount, like would people use it? And they were just like, the thread just got a ton of people replying and like giving lots of useful feedback, right? And so like if that had been the idea, I feel like that would have been like that's over the threshold for when it's good to apply to YC. Like once you're like, okay, I've got an idea, I can articulate it, and I've like done some kind of like quick test to figure out like, do people other than me want it or not? That's a good time. And then like YC specifically, YC ends up investing in companies of different sizes and stages because we get companies applying that are across different sizes and stages. But I think like the company is best suited to helping you early on. I think YC is especially well suited to early on helping people where they're just at that point where they're like, okay, I know like 10 people want it and I know I can build something for those 10, but like I'm not sure how to go from like 10 to 100 or 1,000. And that's where like I think we add the most value to companies. There was the same, again, just to give an example, like Coinbase could be going on about it's about to go public, but like Brian applied, like he hadn't quit his job at Airbnb. He was still a full-time engineer, but like he knew he wanted to buy Bitcoin and he knew that other people wanted to buy Bitcoin because he like spoke to other people on these crypto forums and they were all like, I wish I could buy crypto if it were easier. And so I think that's the right level of like, once you've got that insight and conviction, then you should apply.
Totally. That makes sense. Thanks.
No worries.
That's awesome. That's a really good question, Connor. Tommy, take it away.
Hi, Harj. Thank you again for taking the time to talk with us. It was very informative. I have two questions, one more serious and one less serious.
Okay.
The first one is, I know a lot, like with these talks, we hear people talking about like some of their big failures in life that led them to where they got and how without them they wouldn't be the same. But I'm more interested in hearing about just what are like some of those really common little failures that you deal with no matter what, and how do you deal with them to not get discouraged and keep doing what you need to do?
Interesting question. Like some of the little. Do you mean little failures just in like a startup context?
Yeah, or just anything in your day-to-day life.
Yeah, I guess like in a startup context, the little failures feel like. Well, I'm gonna try and generalize it out. Like, yeah, it sounds obvious, but like failure feels like when you really want something to happen and it doesn't happen. I realize it sounds like general, and like like that can be like kind of anything, but like especially in a startup, like building let's say like building something. It doesn't even have to be a startup. Like the parts that feel like failure are when like you really want to convince a customer to use it, or you're really hoping that when you show it to your friends that they're going to like have great feedback, or that like it just feels like you've done something productive and that you got the outcome you wanted. And then a lot of the time you don't. Like again, like with TripleByte in particular, for example, there's a lot of the times where I tried to sign up a customer and they just said no, or they said yes and then they backed out, or like they signed a contract and they were really unhappy with the product. Like it's just like or like internally, like you start hiring people and you're excited and then like they don't work out, and you feel bad because you're not sure if it's your fault or their fault, and like it's like a whole bunch of stuff like that. Like what, like like how do you keep going? A little bit of what I said before about like you try and have, I think you try and find like something, try to have other things or other people you can go to that like can take your mind off it. Actually, you know what a perfect thing for this kind of thing is? This is where having a peer group helps a ton. Like, say if you're doing something like being a startup founder, having other startup founders who you can go to and talk to them about like the challenges, like it feels good because like you feel like there's camaraderie and you feel like you're not alone in experiencing these failures, even if everyone's got slightly different ones. And so that's what I would do more often than not, like even in life in general. Like if I feel like I'm failing at something, I like talk to someone who's like either at the same stage or experiencing the same thing as me or experienced it recently-ish. Because like if you talk to someone who experienced it a long time ago, I don't know, like if you're having like if you just got married and you're having relationship issues, like it's not as useful talking to someone that like's been married for 30 years as it is for someone that's been married for like 2 or 3 years. And so like or someone who also just got married. Like I don't know if that was the best analogy, but like it's like finding other people who have a similar life experience that's still fresh in their mind that they learned something from, I found is what usually helps me deal with like failures and get motivated to keep going.
Very insightful. Thank you. And my other question was, what do you like to do in your free time to kind of just disconnect and remind yourself that there's a world outside of tech?
Yeah, that's a good question. I don't know. It's unfortunate at the moment. I don't know. I like going for walks. I'm allowed to go for walks. I watch TV with my wife. I like playing chess. I have friends who like quite the chess. And usually like reading, like either like fiction or history, like the kind of things I like doing. I used to like going out to restaurants and that kind of stuff, but yeah, maybe someday.
Oh, someday soon, hopefully.
Yeah, someday soon.
Natalia, take it away.
Hi. So my question is, how do you decide when to ignore or integrate feedback? So throughout your career, what was your filter? Whether it was as a startup founder, hearing a million things from investors and advisors, or even now as a partner at YC, working with a bunch of incredibly smart people who I'm sure are very opinionated.
Yeah, that's a really, really great question. I think, again, there's a couple of things. I think first you have to train yourself. I know some people are naturally like this, but like first you have to train yourself to not like default, not starting from the default position that like you need to integrate the advice. I think it's just very, especially when it's coming from people who are more experienced in a general sense than you are. Like, yeah, this is something we struggle with even as YC partners. Like, we want to give advice to the companies because we have a set of experiences and we think it's valuable advice, but we also need to make sure that we acknowledge that we're not anywhere close to always right, and we're more trying to give advice from the perspective of diagnosing like an area to investigate as opposed to like here's the exact right solution. So it's tricky even for the advice giver. But I'd say like, so start by training yourself to not just default assume that if someone's in a general position of authority, that you should integrate the advice. And then I just think you have to be subtle about it. Like it's about thinking through like the advice you're getting, like who is it coming from, and like how specifically deep is their knowledge in the area they're giving the advice on. So that's something I try and do is like, I don't know, let's just, hypothetically, let's just say you met like a really successful investor. I don't know if you guys even know the, I don't know, let's give you an example of like, I don't know, like Mark Andreessen starts this VC for he wrote Netscape, he's pretty well known VC. Like, you know, if he gives you advice on like, I don't know, how to raise venture capital, you should probably pay a lot of attention to it since it's something he knows a lot about. But like, if you're building like a consumer app for college students and he tries giving you advice about how to build a product that college students are really going to like, you like probably shouldn't pay too much attention to it, even though like he's like famous, super smart person. Like as college student yourself, you would know more about how to build something for college students than he would. And so like, I find like, it's like, can you like apply that filter for when you get advice from people? Like ask yourself, like how qualified are they to give me this advice? And like, then through that lens, how seriously should I weight the advice? And then how does it map up to my experience? And where this like ultimately plays out is if people give you advice that's counter to your own intuitions, if you know whether you can trust their advice more than your own intuitions or not, then you'll make like good decisions. But if you don't, like you'll make bad ones. Like again, with Y Combinator, this is a good example. Like if a YT partner gives you advice on, again, like how to handle investors, like you should follow our advice more than your own intuitions because we have much more experience of dealing with investors than like you would. But like similar thing, like if you're building an app for college students and we're trying to give you deep product insights on how to do that well, like you shouldn't like listen to us.
That's awesome. Great question, Natalia. Natalia always has the best questions. She always throws in really good questions to our speakers. Before we wrap up, would anyone else like to ask Harj a question? Not going to get this chance again. He's sitting right here.
In this Zoom room.
In the Zoom room, virtually. Alrighty. Well, thank you everyone.
London? Sorry. I just have to know.
Go ahead.
Do you support any club in London?
Yeah, Arsenal. I support Arsenal.
Oh.
Pain look. Oh. I agree.
I'm sorry.
That's okay. We're on an upwards trend though. This is probably a bit of an in-joke, but yeah, it's looking promising.
Thanks, Tommy. Definitely. We wanted to get that. We wanted to get that out before you left.
Closing question. I appreciate it at least.
Right. Awesome. Well, Harj, thank you so much for, again, taking the time. I know you're really busy. I know you talk to a lot of people every day. And I'm sure the last thing you want to do is more talking, but definitely one of our best fireside chats. So we appreciate you making the time to come.
Thank you. It's great to meet everyone. I'm Harj at mycombinator.com if you have questions about ICO stuff.
Awesome. Thank you. And everyone, all our cohort Lava alum, thank you for coming. I hope you enjoyed the fireside chat and get excited because we have a really, really great semester planned out. And Harj, we'll let you know when our demo night is.
Sounds awesome.
Awesome. Bye, everyone. Thank you.